morning, everyone. It is 8 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call this Committee on Appointments to order. Nice to see everyone. And just a reminder, we were just saying we have this meeting this week, and then our next City Commission meeting day is next week as well, just due to the holiday. So a little public service announcement, City Clerk. So we have a number of items to vote on today, as well as I think some brief discussion of our current vacancy list. So the first item is a resolution confirming Mayor Bliss's appointment of Christopher Germain to the City Planning Commission. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Any comments about this appointment? I could share some things if not. Mr. Germain, Mr. Germain, I believe currently works for the MEDC, does have a background in urban planning, and so appreciate that he has some interest, and look forward to him just serving on this body and just continuing to keep that body fully whole, given everything that's in front of the Planning Commission. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. The next is a resolution approving the City Commission's appointment of Bruce McCoy to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Thank you. Moved and supported. So this is also another body that we, try to focus on because of what's in front of them. And I believe with this appointment, we still have we have one vacancy right now. This will fill that one, Daniel, and I think we may have a resignation, so we still have some interest that we need to continue with BZA.
What ward is McCoy from?
I believe, I'm going to look at Daniel because I don't remember now.
Give me just one moment.
I want to say second, but I don't know for.
Third ward.
Third ward. All right. Well, thank you, Daniel. Any questions, colleagues, about this appointment?
None.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. The next item is a resolution confirming Mayor Bliss's appointment of Colin Hillary to the Downtown Improvement District Board. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Any comments on this appointment, colleagues? All right. I think with this board, we'll also actually maybe be full as well. We only have one vacancy. I think it was the remainder of a term. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is a resolution confirming Mayor Bliss's appointment of Sarah Hampton to the Housing Appeals Board. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
This has been moved and supported. If you recall, colleagues, we talked about Sarah Hampton at our working meeting. And I know that the Housing Appeals Board, I see Ms. Bohach out in the audience. Oftentimes, just with the appeals, having to go out, seeing different things and doing some research, like many, just takes a little bit more time for the appointee. So it's always good to have that body filled as well. I think after this, we'll have 2 openings still, and we may have some PIFs to consider. So, all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next is a resolution confirming Mayor Bliss's appointment of Kim Bodie to the North Quarter Improvement Authority. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Right, thank you. This is the body that I serve on, colleagues. Kim Bodie is a business owner, longtime business owner in the city, has just recently moved her business, 843 Marketing, to the Plainfield corridor. So glad to see further development there, and excited to have Ms. Bodie's expertise on that body.
Great.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
That carries. Thank you. And the last resolution in front of us is Mayor Bliss's, confirming Mayor Bliss's appointment of Craig Clark to the Mobile GR Commission. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right. And I don't really have any other comments about Mr. Craig Clark owns a business in our community as well. He is outside of Grand Rapids, I think, in EGR, but that is allowable under these mobile GR bylaws. Obviously, of course, as we look at, what we're doing in the city, but also having regional solutions with partners. So,
That's great.
and I believe this will also fill the one remainder that we have on there. So that's good. So, Mr. Camaro, you will have a full body. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it carries. Thank you. All right, good work
I
today.
just want
Yes.
to make one note on that, though. I don't want to speak for Justin and Josh, but they did have some concerns that anytime there's an opening coming forward to look at residency, because they do have kind of they want to balance that
Okay.
out. So
Sure.
let's just put that in the back of our minds for residents to balance that back out of residents on that board.
That's
Okay,
fair.
thank you for that, and thank you, Justin. So we will keep that in mind, and I think what we have talked about, I guess the next item, which is really a broad item, thank you, City Clerk, going down to the vacancies. I just want to say thank you to Daniel. Daniel and I know also the City Clerk and Daniel have spent a significant amount of time here as we prep for our year-end appointment. So I just wanted to publicly say thank you for the work that has gone into this, and the work to also not only do the work in front of us, but to focus on just constant process improvement, because again, 40 boards, we have to remember that. So
It's a labor of love.
the labor of love. So colleagues, please know that we will have a number of items that will appear for our year-end appointments next week. I don't know how many action items it's shaping out to be, but
So actually, the end of your appointments item will just be one long item.
oh, okay. So we won't have to vote
appointing
on
all
each
of
one.
those- No, yep,
Oh.
it's just the one.
Okay.
Efficient.
Okay. So Joel wants me to tell him thank you too. again.
I will say that preceded me. So,
Okay. Good leadership is, just being open and honest. So, okay, that's good to know, because I wondered, I couldn't remember from last year what that was. So it's good to know that it will just be a variety. So we had a number of people who were re-upping for the year. We've talked about some that we have open. We'll certainly still have work in front of us, colleagues, as we go into the new year with the Housing Fund Board.
So
but
those
also,
will be in January
those
then?
will be in January. Yeah. I think in terms of some of the timing, and I think at the last count we had 90 people who had applied to
wow.
serve on the board. That was direct outreach, so I think that's the
Great.
power of direct outreach when we ask. I also think that out of that 90, of course, we have our appointees,
Right.
and Daniel has been working on those ones. Some of them are still going through the vetting process. So they may be still in review with income tax and other things like that, but that's moving along because ours is 6, right? 6 from us and the city manager and the mayor. So you'll see that next year. And then we'll also be able to hone in on some of the other openings that we have. So there are some bodies that we try to prioritize that might only meet every quarter versus ones that are going to be monthly, and that might be impacted by not having a full body. Okay? Do you all have any questions about the Housing Fund Board? Because obviously that's a big one, but we will certainly keep that updated and also provide you with the list. I know there's some filterings going on. Again, looking at it, residency is not the only requirement, or is not a disqualifier for individuals, but much like was said, we want to make sure it's balanced with those who do live in the city or, with significant regional partnerships, so.
Commissioner Lanier and I talked with Mr. Michael Townsend some time ago, and we were wondering, has he applied? Because I don't remember seeing his name on the list.
Maurice Townsend?
Yeah, Maurice.
Yes. Yep, no problem. When Daniel and I met last week Friday, he had not. I don't know if anything has changed since then.
It sure has. He has applied, yes, Commissioner.
Oh, nice.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner, for jumping on top of that.
Well,
Appreciate
I
it.
was reaching out to him to find out what was going on.
Yeah.
So apparently he decided to go ahead and do something before I got to him.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, I know that, sometimes like anything we have to do, it's like, okay, I'm going to get to that. It's just that it does take a while to go through the vetting. We'll certainly prioritize these ones because we want to get this board seated, but thank you for that. So I think actually then all of us as colleagues, our appointees have at least submitted a PIF,
Correct.
as well as the mayor's appointee has an active PIF, and the city manager appointment will be the city manager himself.
Okay.
Okay? So thank you. So what's moving along?
I just have
Yes.
another note on it. I don't know if you get these emails as well, but I know the city manager and I did. So community active emails, how we get, where they can just someone builds a draft letter and then people can just sign their names onto it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've gotten quite a few of those about this board.
Yes.
And so I'm
you.
assuming you have gotten them too, but it is going to be connected to the communications for tonight's meeting.
Okay, yes.
So if you want to see, there's a list of who have sent them to me. So I just have come out, it's not a big list, it's like about 18 to 20 or something like that.
Okay.
So just to let you know that, or for anybody watching, that we did receive communications about what we should be looking at. or
What we should prioritize.
Correct.
Yes, yes, thank you, City Clerk, I appreciate that. I have received emails, so this would be a form, typically it is different platforms that allow residents, neighbors to submit a general statement letter to us. I have received probably about the same. It has,
Yeah, that's my guess.
so thank you for calling that out. I think that's important for this body. Okay, so we talked about housing, which is on this item, so we're still under the right items. Could you go back up to the BZA, Mr. City Clerk? And so as we just voted on Mr. McCoy, this one will be filled, but I do anticipate a resignation there in 2022. So we'll work on that one. I have somebody as well, Commissioner Moody, who's like, let's do this PIF. I will sit and do it with you if you have any questions. On the Planning Commission, we just filled that role as well, but that's one to always stay connected to. The Civil Service Board, I serve on this body. I have somebody in the 3rd Ward who said, could we reconnect in 2022? We meet every other month, so it's probably, we often have regular business to attend to, for sure, because it's related to oversight of HR functions. So we'll work on that unless anyone knows somebody who would like to serve on civil service. We would like somebody from the 3rd Ward, typically those that have a legal background, who have worked in HR or other systems related to personnel or human resources, tend to be individuals who are sort of the best to serve, but certainly open to other individuals with experiences. So that's one. Our Community Relations Commission, we do have an individual who is interested. Again, was saying, could we reconnect in 2022? That I know the mayor and Ms. Stout have talked about. I don't have an update about the Construction Code Board of Appeals, nor for the DID or the DDA. I do know that we have one in the communications for tonight. Mr. Verhulst has submitted a resignation from this body, from the Economic Development and Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. I know the mayor is looking at a few appointments there. There was one question about if there could be 2 commissioners that serve on that. Daniel, Patrick, do we have a? Daniel's like, yes, we're going to pass it to Patrick.
I haven't had a chance to review those.
Thank you.
I don't get to speak very often. I didn't have a chance to fully review the bylaws yet, but it's not it's my understanding that it wouldn't be a problem if 2 city commissioners sat on that board.
Okay.
But I will have to double check.
Okay, if you could share that. I know we won't make it for the year-end appointments, I don't think. We're probably past the deadline for agenda items. Although we'll have some of our commission appointments, so if it is me, we probably could walk it on, maybe.
Right, if it's one of us.
But I will let Daniel figure that out. But if you could follow up, Patrick, with Daniel in this next week or so, so then either if we don't get it on year end, we'll get it on the first meeting in January. Okay. And thank you, Commissioner Moody, for serving on that body as well. So.
Thank you.
I don't have any for our electrical or building authorities. Again, those ones are much more technical in nature, and we rely heavily on the liaisons because of that. So we could ask Mr. Berkman, and who's the other liaison for the one above that, City Clerk? Okay, Mr. Ed Longstreet.
It's a new liaison, so.
Okay, I was going to say, okay, thank you. For the Grand Rapids Historical Commission, I do believe that we'll have, we have some year-end appointments for that one. And I think, Daniel, where did we land on that one? That there was somebody who's termed out, Mr. Chris Reeder. So many thanks to him for his service.
Yeah.
And then we have,
We need to find a new board for him.
Right.
we can make that happen. And then I know we had another, did we have 2 individuals that were termed out, Daniel, I believe, on there? I think Jennifer may have been, no, or Jennifer was replacing somebody else that was getting termed out.
Are you confusing that with historic preservation? Because I don't think Chris Reader was the
Oh, you
historical
know what?
commission.
We had that whole conversation last week,
No,
didn't we,
I think he was
Daniel?
on historic
Lots of differences
preservation.
there.
Yeah, so the Historical Commission, we still do have, we have 2 openings.
Yeah, we have 3 in a year, but I think we're waiting for their PIFs, correct?
Okay, thank you. You know what, we gotta come up with some acronyms. Okay, CAB, this is one where I know we have a few appointments here. So the mayor has an appointment. I think Commissioner O'Connor and Commissioner Moody, you have an appointment on CAB. We've also been asked for this new body that will be focusing on some of the systemic changes to CAB. So colleagues, we have that appointment process.
That won't come through us,
That won't
though,
come
right?
through us, though. I don't believe that is a requirement for a PIF. That's much like,
Task
actually, I don't know. We should probably check that out.
Yeah, sure.
We were asked, if you recall, we received a message from Mr. Davis about moving forward with that. And then we talked about housing appeals, so we've got one, and we've got some year-end appointments as well there. We just added somebody to Michigan Street last meeting, I believe. So I don't know if that's been updated or if that's also an opening. I'd have to go back. We just discussed mobile GR, so that is going to be filled. We also just talked about North Quarter. Please know we're going to have 2 individuals who are not going to re-up, but we have to wait for the term to end, and then that will be updated accordingly. We've also talked about Parks and Rec Advisory Board, and there are some year-end appointments there that Daniel's been working on. So I believe we should be all set with Parks and Rec's Board. Public Safety is another one that a number of us have appointments on. I've talked to our colleagues about that. And really, the rest of the bodies, Urban Agriculture and Urban Forestry. Daniel also shared with us those that are working meeting, and so there are some appointments there. And then no comments about Vital Streets. I think that's a conversation for the new year. I've talked to the mayor about we've had a lot of turnover, rightly so, new leadership's coming in, and pretty much all of these organizations that are outside of the commission. So I think we need to think about reimagining that body. We will save that for 2022.
Yeah.
So colleagues, that was a number of things. I appreciate all the work that we've put in for, just getting our appointments up to speed, getting the processes up to speed. We have talked, and you'll hear more in the new year about how to best stay connected with liaisons. I've talked to Daniel, is it asking liaisons a few times a year to even submit a form, just so then we have some information about, are there any considerations or things that they want us to consider, like Mr. Kimura had shared about the residency piece. So
Right.
just some of those things that we can stay on track of versus sort of getting to the end of the year. And so we talked about starting the year-end process in September, just to make sure we give ourselves enough of this runway. So we had some extra work with Housing Fund Board, but I look forward to this body staying intact for next year and continuing this good work.
Yeah, it's going to be this setup.
Yes, it will be the
Yeah.
3 of us again.
Same thing.
Yeah.
That's great.
All right, well, with that, unless there's any other business, colleagues,
Right here.
Great.
Thank you.
we can go ahead and call this meeting adjourned at 8:19. Thank you.
right, good morning, everyone. We'll call the fiscal committee meeting to order here at 8:30. First item on the agenda this morning is a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Dr. Robert Lamson, PhD, Bluestone Psych LLC, for a not-to-exceed amount of $40,000.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. D.C. Reifenberg, good morning, sir.
Good morning, how are you?
Well,
I'd like to thank the members of the fiscal committee for their time this morning. This is a contract not to exceed $40,000 with Dr. Lamson, who's the psychologist who specializes in police officers. He's one of 2 in the state. He provides services with post-conditional offers of higher evaluations and also with fitness for duty evaluations when we seem fit.
very good, sir. Kylix, questions for D.C. Reifenberg?
Yeah, just one. DC, how long has this doctor worked with the police department?
I'm not sure what the timeline is on that, but I know it's at least the last 10 years.
20 at least,
What's that?
at least 20.
At least 20 years?
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Any further questions? All right, hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, sir. Item 2, ordinance amending section 4.2 of ordinance 2019-56, new classification, partnerships and development coordinator.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Ms. Foster, good morning.
Good morning. Whew. So we have, the first resolution today is for the Partnership and Development Coordinator for the Parks and Rec Department. We did a class comp study and we aligned the duties with what the needs of the department and what the incumbent was doing, which is managing projects and community engagement, collaborations, and planning and development. And this resulted in a new classification being written up, and the wages range 10 APA, and this was given to the Civil Service Board to review the classification, the specs, and also the wages, and that was approved on the 9th.
Colleagues, questions? All right, hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 3 is an ordinance to amend section 4.4 of ordinance 2019-55, range change for parking customer service representative 1, and the establishment of a new classification, utilities, operations, and maintenance crew leader.
So moved.
Support.
Okay, this
supported.
resulted also as classification study for the Parks and Rec Department for the parking customer service representative number 1, and that the work has evolved, and there has been an increase in the customer service and also kind of the location of the work. They used to be in the parking ramps, and now they're in a dispatch center, and so we deemed that that work is at a higher level. And so there was a range from 7 to 10 for that position. And then the other one's a brand-new classification, the Utilities Operations and Maintenance Crew Leader, and that's for the wastewater plant. And this is in line with another position that's actually in the water plant, but it aligns the duties to the wastewater plant and the license requirements.
Very good. Colleagues, questions? All right, hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Foster. Item 4, resolution authorizing a payment to the Grand Rapids Community Foundation in the amount of $957,365.78 to make the first deposit to the City of Grand Rapids Affordable Housing Fund.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Mr. DeLong, good morning, sir.
Sure, thank you, Commissioners.
Making that a nice round number, too.
Yeah, well, we like to be exact when it comes to the Housing Fund. So what we're doing with this item is now we're appropriating the money and spending it, we're authorizing the expenditure of the funds to create the fund with the Community Foundation. So I won't repeat the number, you've stated it correctly. And what we would do with this is make our first deposit. So CFO Claren and I have been working with the foundation. They're ready to receive the funds, and we will set up the initial investment within their fund structure, and we'll be having our, we'll be on the way. So we recommend proceeding with this deposit.
Very good. Colleagues, questions?
Glad to see it happen.
All right. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Item 5, resolution authorizing conditional approval of tax exemption and payment in lieu of taxes pilot for the Martin New Apartments.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Ms. Bohach?
Good morning. Well, hopefully this item, if approved in the future, will make that number a little more round, right? So this is a pilot request for a project that's located at 106 and 120 South Division. It's the Martineau Apartments, and it's the developer was Dwelling Place of Grand Rapids Nonprofit Housing Corporation, and it's a project that was completed in 2006, and it currently has a pilot that is expiring. It was approved in 2004, but the period of affordability started in 2006. And at that time, our pilot ordinance corresponded to that period of affordability, and our ordinance was changed over the years, which would allow them to have an extension that now that now goes out further. And so this would be a request for this to go out 3 more years. And the project itself has there's 5 condominium units. 2 of those buildings contain the affordable rental properties within them, which consist of 23 units. The developer has requested the option number 1 that does make a contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund. And you can see on the estimated benefits schedule in the item, the benefit to the project would be just over $11,000 and a $4,000 contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund.
Very good. Colleagues, questions? All right, hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 6, resolution authorizing bid list for December 7, 2021.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported. Ms. Gold, anything unusual you'd like to point out on the bid list?
No.
Colleagues, any questions about the bid list? All right, hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 7 is the forecasting report for December 7, 2021. Colleagues, any questions about this?
No.
All right, hearing none, that report will be received and filed. Item 8, warrant report for November 3rd, 2021 through November 23, 2021. Mr. Comptroller.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, everyone. For the period referenced, the city released cash payments totaling approximately $40.5 million, which includes approximately $9.2 million for employee payroll expense and just over $1,014,000 for income tax warrants during that period. In terms of quantity, that equaled 973 income tax refunds being issued and 1,837 accounts payable checks being issued. And the tables contained on the following pages contain all the details of the payments issued exceeding the amount of $20,000.
All right, colleagues, questions? All right, hearing none, that report will be received and filed. Thank you, sir. Item 9, Treasurer's Report for period November 2, 2021 through November 22, 2021. Mr. Treasurer, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. With our report today, really it's just highlighting the fact that we are seeing a continuity of leadership at the Federal Reserve. So Mr. Jerome Powell was able to be reconfirmed. He's been wildly popular with the seating members of the Senate. 84 of those members, which are still in the Senate, had confirmed him previously. There was talk about whether or not they were going to reconfirm him or not, or bring up Dr. Brainard, who is another very, very competent individual. Well, now we have a director and we have a deputy that are leading the Fed that we are very happy to see there. They lend some very good credibility to our financial system, to our economy, and to our government. So we're very happy to see that. And so the nice thing about it, sometimes we try to not be political, but in this case, we have Mr. Powell, who's a Republican, Dr. Brainard, who's a Democrat. So look at it this way, this is where we should be working together. And so if I was to say anything about this, other than the stability, it's the fact that I'm confident that we have people that can work together in our federal government. And this is hugely successful for the United States, our government, and our Federal Reserve. So far right now with our other report, we're at $541 million in funds and we're earning 1.35%. With that, I conclude our report for this week.
Very good. Colleagues, questions for the Treasurer? All right, hearing none, that report will be received and filed. And with that, we will conclude this fiscal committee meeting at 8:39. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Normally, we're looking for somebody. All right, good morning, everybody. We have 2 minutes to go. I can't start. Oh, see, my clock here says 9:14. I guess it'd be 1 minute early. It'd be 1 minute early. We'll wait for 1 more minute yet.
Catch anybody unaware. I know it's
Can you hear a pin drop? It's quiet.
Everyone's drowning out the voices in my head.
Oh, man. Okay, now we can start. So, good morning, everybody. We'll kick off this Community Development Committee meeting. We have 7 items or so. The first one is a resolution approving an amendment to the cost-sharing and irrevocable right to use fiber optics agreement with Kent County and the Kent Intermediate School District. Can I get a motion? All right. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. What we have in front of us right now is the resolution to approve a modification to our agreement with the Kent ISD as well as Kent County. This has no cost to it. It's just our agreement allowing them to add to the fiber network, and then we reallocate costs after that.
Okay. Any questions about that? None? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. It carries. Thank you. Next is a resolution approving professional engineering services with Fishbeck Incorporated to provide capital project implementation and support services at the Water Resource Recovery Facility with total amount not to exceed $346,900.
Support.
All right. Who's gonna
Thank
share
you,
about this
Mr. Chairman. This item is related to the implementation of the biodigestion project. And what we're recommending here is retaining a qualified team for completion of the project, the capital portion of the project, to guide that, for startup operations, for commissioning, and for training of both current and new staff that we're recruiting now. And this is a critical success factor item, we believe. And we've done proposals to, letter proposals to secure these services. And we've evaluated the firms, and we're recommending that Fishbeck, Thompson, Carr, and Huber be the one to come on board to help us with this. So these services will augment staff. They'll help us manage both the biodigestion implementation, the remainder of the capital projects, the startup commissioning and training, as I've said, and also help manage the variety of other capital projects we have going on at the Water Resource Recovery Facility. So this is a force multiplier for helping us get this done, and we're recommending that we go ahead at a cost of $346,900.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Grenier is also here to help with that.
Great. Questions here? I think a force multiplier is important to protect that big investment that we've made in
Thank you.
that facility.
Absolutely. So-
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. It carries. Next, we have a resolution accepting a sidewalk and utility easement and authorizing payments in the amount not to exceed $6,500 for improvements in Collindale Avenue from Lake Michigan Drive to Leonard Street.
I'll move it.
Support.
Okay, is this you, Jeff? Good morning.
Good morning. This easement is necessary for a project we have. This easement is necessary for a project we have coming up in the 2022 construction season. It's the resurfacing of Collindale from Lake Michigan Drive to Leonard Street. And a roundabout is proposed at the Burritt Street intersection with Collindale. And although there's not sidewalk proposed with this project at this time, this will allow for a clear vision zone at those corners and allow for a sidewalk or shared use path to be constructed in the future. There is an easement required on another corner opposite of this one, and that property owner has indicated their willingness to provide that easement, and that'll be presented at a later date.
Okay, so that'll be coming yet.
Yes.
Any questions about this?
Love the roundabout, brother. I do.
You and
Yes.
6 other people. No, I'm just kidding.
Love them.
No, they are effective. That is fair. I do appreciate the staff's work on this. I know that's a complicated street and then one that's really important. And so these easements are important. So any other questions? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Carries. Next is a resolution approving an increase of $875,000 for Lake Michigan filtration plant replacement of the medium voltage switchgear for a total not to exceed $5,116,030.
I'll move it.
Support.
Okay. Is this you too, Jeff? Or sorry?
Yes. This is a project to replace the medium voltage switchgear at the Lake Michigan filtration plant. During procurement of the supplier, Siemens was the supplier listed for the medium voltage gear, and during their more formal design after award, it was determined that this was not going to fit in the footprint at the low lift pump station, and various options were evaluated to determine if a catwalk could be installed, and that was going to cause issues with future maintenance of the pumps, so that option was rejected. There was also an option evaluated to eliminate this from the project and bid it with a future project. It was determined that would be more costly in the future. So ultimately, the option being recommended by staff is to replace the Siemens supplied equipment with Eaton supplied equipment, and thus the increase in cost.
Okay. Questions? Did you have anything you want to add?
No, Jeff covered it.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries. Next, we have a resolution approving a construction agreement and accepting public utilities easements for Windy West.
I'll move it.
Support.
The next 4 projects are related to construction agreements.
Okay.
The first one is in Kentwood. It involves construction of 14 single-family homes. Inspection will be done by the city of Kentwood, and the project is located north of 52nd Street and east of Breton Avenue.
Any questions? They're all pretty standard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It carries. Next is a resolution approving a construction agreement in the amount of $25,000 for 430 Monroe, the Grip Liner Building.
Move it.
Support.
This is just around the corner here, north of Michigan, on the east side of Monroe. It's in connection with the construction of the Perigo building under construction, and this will allow for relocation of some existing street lighting and some realignment of the east curb line.
Okay. Any questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. It carries. Next is a resolution approving a construction agreement and accepting public utilities easements for, let me scroll up there for me, Joel. For Woodhaven condominiums.
So moved.
Support.
This is another project in the city of Kentwood. It involves 41 condo units with 11 buildings. There are 5 public utility easements, and inspection will be done by the city of Kentwood. This project is located on the south side of 44th Street and east of Walma Avenue.
Okay. Glad to hear that Kentwood's building some housing. Any questions about this one? All those in favor say aye. Aye. It carries. And last, this is a resolution approving a construction agreement and accepting a public utilities easement for Summerbrook Estates Phase 2.
So moved.
Support.
All right.
This is the project in the city of Walker. Inspection will be done by a consultant of the city of Walker's choosing. This is on the south side of Leonard and east of Kinney. And looks like to be 22 single-family homes with this project, so.
Great. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, it carries.
Mr. Chairperson? So I would just want to note that, so you approved 3 construction agreements today
Yeah.
for construction of housing, a
Yeah.
total of 77 units.
That's right.
And those units are in the, outside of the city, but within our retail service area.
That's right.
And so there are many ways that we can facilitate the construction of housing. This is one of them.
This is one of them.
And you'll see more of those come through in the next couple of weeks. So we're actually going to go back and tally up how many we've done of this sort,
Yeah.
because this helps, it's just our way to help our partner communities build more housing.
Yeah, everybody's on the same team for that one, that's for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I would love to see that number, and especially the when it's on a corridor like Leonard Street, where they could just easily pop into the city, or if it's in Kentwood, where the rapid runs all the way to those places.
We've seen, development along the Laker Line
Yes.
route.
Yeah.
So this came up in a discussion we were having during agenda review with the city manager, and he's like, hey, how much are we really doing outside of the borders of the city? And we are having an impact, so.
Yeah, well, yeah, especially up Lake Michigan Drive, and there's more coming up there, so.
Yep.
That'll be interesting. All right, I think that concludes our work. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Jeff, for joining us up here for the day. And the meeting's adjourned.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's City Commission, Commission of the Whole. We just have one action item before we get to our briefing, but before we get to that, I would like to take this moment and welcome the amazing members of the Mayor's Youth Council that will be joining us for the rest of this school year. So they're joining us this morning. I think, is Shannon here? Do I see Shannon? There she is. So maybe I'll start. What I'd like to do, commissioners, is just give them a chance to introduce themselves, and then maybe we can take a picture with them. I think I'll start with Shannon. She can come up and tell us how many students we will have as a part of our Mayor's Youth Council this year. I know each of us have a list of the students with their biographies, but I'd like for them to come up and introduce themselves, and then maybe they can gather up here for a picture.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you. So, and thank you, city commissioners and city manager and other city staff. We have this year's Mayor's Youth Council, so they are 9th through 12th grade students who attend a variety of high schools in the area, but they're all Grand Rapids residents. And so today is their day-long orientation into city government. So we'll be learning about all there is to know about the ins and outs of city government. And so we have about 25 students with us today. And so as the mayor said, they'll be with us for a whole school year. So they'll be meeting with the mayor on a monthly basis. They'll be meeting with other city staff and community leaders to really understand the functions of city government and what role they play in city government. So at this time, as the mayor said, we'll have all of the young people stand here in front of this kiosk, state your name, what school you attend, and what ward you live in, and then just kind of form maybe a semicircle similar to the pattern that you see right before you. So we'll start with you.
My name is Aisha Mohammed, and I go to Union High School, and I'm in First Ward. My name is Sawara Mohammed, and I go to Union High School, and I'm also in First Ward.
My name is Alex Burns. I go to City High School, and I'm in the 3rd ward.
My name is Kaden, and I go to Grand River Prep High School, and I'm in the 3rd ward.
My name is Evie Duncan. I go to Grand Rapids Museum High, and I'm in the 3rd ward.
My name is Liam Duncan. I go to Grand Rapids Montessori High School, and I'm in the 3rd ward.
My name is Claudia Dimstra. I go to City High School, and I'm in the 1st ward.
Hi, my name is Erin Howard. I go to Southwest Middle High Academia Bilingue, and I'm in the 3rd ward.
My name is Laura DeBoer. I go to City High Middle School, and I'm in the 3rd ward.
My name is Lena Reeves. I'm in the 2nd ward, and I go to City High School.
Hi, my name is Brittany Garcia. I go to City High Middle School, and I'm in the 1st ward.
My name is Megan Carpenter. I live in the 1st ward, and I also go to City High School.
Hello everyone, my name is Miguel Hernandez. I go to City High Middle School, and I'm in the 1st ward.
My name is Jalen Calderon. I go to UPrep, and I'm in the 2nd ward.
Hi, my name is Darcy Doris. I attend East Kentwood High School, and I live in the 1st ward.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Beresford. I live in the 1st ward, and I go to City.
Hi, my name is Kate Shearing. I go to Catholic Central High School, and I'm in the 3rd ward.
Hi, I'm Sophia Ferenzi. I go to the Public Museum High School, and I live in the 3rd ward.
Hello, my name is Ivan Shuri. I go to the Grand Rapids Public Museum High School, and I am from the 3rd ward.
My name is Madeline Uren. I go to City High School, and I am the 2nd ward.
Hi, my name is Abigail Hahn. I also go to City, and I also live in the 2nd ward.
Hello, my name is Miller Broughton. I go to City High School and I'm in the 2nd ward.
Hello, I'm Nevaeh Mancha. I go to City High and I live in the 2nd ward.
Hi, my name is Sarah Robinette. I go to City, and I'm also in the 2nd ward.
Hello, my name is Henry Nygaard Tapp, and I live in the 3rd ward, and I go to City.
Hi, my name is Annie Norman. I also go to City, and I live in the 3rd ward.
You know, we can form 2 lines. We can get a quick picture with the mayor, and then I also want to recognize our 2 interns, OCC interns that are here with us that will be following the young people throughout their school year. This school year is Cindy Gonzalez, who is a senior at Michigan State University. And then we also have Ashton Duncan, who is a junior at Grand Valley State University. So, thank you. And I think we'll have the elected officials and city manager come down. Well, unless you can see behind. Nope. Right?
Mr. Rubber, I can't see you behind the wall there. Thank you all.
All right, well, thank you for introducing yourself. I'm looking forward. I've already had a chance to spend time with the group as a whole, and then also I have smaller coffee talks. So I've had a chance to already get to know some of the students, and we're looking forward to having you with us throughout the school year. And I know you'll have an opportunity to meet with your ward commissioners and learn all about local government. So thank you. And then commissioners, 2 other people we would like to recognize. I know the city manager has someone that he'd like to recognize, and then our deputy city attorney does as well.
Thank you, Mayor, and congratulations to all the students who are participating in Youth Council. Look forward to your work and engagement on important public policy issues here in the city. At this time, I'd also like to recognize one of the mentees in the program that I'm participating in at Grand Valley State University. I am assigned as his mentor, and it is Mr. Julian Sanders. Could you please stand up? Mr. Sanders remain standing. He is a senior, and he is majoring in political science and minoring in criminal justice, and will graduate this December. We have hopefully he will someday work for the city of Grand Rapids, but he has decided to pursue a career in law, and will be hopefully attending law school subsequent to his graduation. But we want to welcome him today. He's shadowing me a portion of the morning, and we'll have an interesting discussion on a matter that relates to criminal justice on our surveillance policy shortly. So I want to welcome him to the chamber, and look forward to continuing to work with him until he graduates.
Welcome.
I would like to recognize Miss Amanda Ingram, if you could stand, Amanda. We have a longstanding internship program in the law department where we welcome law school students and other individuals interested in political science. So if Mr. Sanders is interested as you pursue your legal career, we'd welcome you to apply as well. Ms. Ingram is graduating law school here shortly. She is a third-year law school student, has spent time in our litigation department, also spent time across the street at the courthouse in the enforcement division, and now is rounding out her experience here in our municipal affairs division. She has accepted a job with the Court of Appeals, currently works in the local district court system, and has just been an outstanding intern and very helpful to us in our department, and has really had a well-rounded experience in this short time that she's been with us. So thank you to Ms. Ingram, and thank you to the commission for allowing us to have that internship program in our department.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your service. All right, well, thank you. It's good to have all of you in our chambers today. We have a short agenda before us. We just have one action item and then a really important briefing. So the first action item and only action item is a request for me to travel to the Mayor's Innovation Winter Meeting and the U.S. Conference of Mayors in January, which is located in Washington, D.C. Can I get a motion? So moved. Support. All right, moved and supported. Commissioners, I should note as well, I know last spring you approved for me to travel for the U.S. Conference Summer Meeting in June, and that was canceled because of COVID. So that was just done virtually at no cost. So at this point, U.S. Conference and MIP, they are planning to meet in person. They'll do hybrid, so I plan to attend in person. But if that changes, I'll let you know. Okay. So, all right, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? It carries. All right, Commissioners, that will quickly take us to our briefing today. This is a briefing that has been, or I should say this is an issue that our Office of Oversight and Accountability has been working on for quite some time with our police department and community partners. So maybe I'll start with our city manager, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. We're pleased today to give you an update on some of the work that our Oversight Office has been doing on the surveillance policy. If you recall, last year there were several opportunities in which in 2020 where this topic came up. One occurred when the county was willing to fund additional technology to help the police department in reducing crime, namely ShotSpotter. And there were questions and concerns around the use of that technology and surveillance, and the police chief has also indicated as part of his strategic plan he wanted to continue to use technology in preventing and responding to crime, and had talked about the use of drones. And so that caused us to have conversations not only internally but with community members, and Mr. Davis has done some engagement from his office, both with community as well as with both police, fire departments, and other stakeholders in that department. And today we'll give an update of the work that he's done. And so after he does, Mayor, I see Chief Payne here. I don't see Chief Lehman, but I also would invite them to approach the podium after Mr. Davis presents his findings and share whatever observations that they may have as well.
Thank you, City Manager, and good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. As the City Manager indicated, this is an opportunity for us to talk about Administrative Policy 1503, which is our surveillance policy here in the City of Grand Rapids. So, by way of background, this policy went into effect on March 24th of 2015, and it was signed into effect by then City Manager Greg Sundstrom. This policy was created in consultation with community groups, and the ACLU was very involved in that initial policy drafting process. To date, since that policy has been in place, it's important that we point out that there have been no substantiated violations of this policy. These changes are proactive and reflect the city's commitment to elevating resident voice in city operations. Over a year ago now, in November of 2020, community members, including the NAACP, which some of the representatives are present here today. We see President Jackson as well as Attorney Carlton Mears and Ahmad Hardy, who've been pivotal in his work. But they reached out to our office and to the city seeking revisions to this policy. Since that time, staff has worked with community to develop this revised policy. And as City Manager spoke to, we've worked with multiple departments. I think it's important to point out that the City Attorney's Office has just been pivotal in moving forward with this work. So since this is an administrative policy, the city manager has the authority to implement the updates. However, changes to this policy must be presented to the city commission prior to the changes going into effect. So essentially, that is what we're doing today. On this slide, you see the major revisions that have been made to the policy. So there's several areas here. You'll see an expanded purpose statement, as well as added definitions to better explain the terms included in the policy. You'll see that we elevated resident voice in the acquisition process by adding a public hearing. We created a standard of review for approval. We also added explicit equity considerations to operational protocols, as well as created a governance structure for complaints and audits. We established a public safety committee as the surveillance oversight committee for the city and elevated advisory committee members' positions on those surveillance items. We also mandated the use of surveillance use reports, increased transparency by adding annual surveillance reports, and established prohibited uses of the technology. We removed and replaced exigent circumstances with extenuating circumstances, and we'll talk more about all of those things as we go through the briefing. So as you look at these slides, you'll see that some of the language is in black and some of it is in red. The black language represents language that already existed, and the red represents changes or added language. So as it relates to the purpose statement, the purpose of the policy is to establish a uniform policy to be followed by city departments when acquiring surveillance equipment and services for use in city operations. This is including but not limited to ensuring the safety of persons and property and the investigation of illegal behavior, and to ensure that the privacy interests of Grand Rapidians are considered in the decision to acquire, use, or deploy new surveillance equipment or surveillance services. So again, in creating this expanded purpose statement, we really wanted the purpose statement to reflect all of the things we've heard in community, all of the things we've heard from the dais as we talk about this important technology that is used to help keep our community safe and to protect property and to protect people. We also want to make sure that those other interests are considered. So here you'll see added definitions, and I won't read every definition, but I'll talk to them briefly. So the first definition you see here is an audit summary, and that's a formal report that will be issued by the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability in response to complaints that may be filed related to a potential violation of this policy. And we go into more detail about what that looks like here. There's another definition, and that's extenuating circumstances, which means incidents involving a good faith belief that an imminent danger or individual safety or public health is likely. And we'll talk more about that later in the presentation. You'll see a definition for natural disaster that comports with our normal definitions of natural disaster. And then you'll also see a definition for the word weaponize, which means to operate in or utilize surveillance equipment or surveillance services equipped with weapons. And it goes on again to further detail there. But what you'll see later in the presentation is that weaponized weapons are one of those prohibited weaponized surveillance equipment is one of those prohibited uses. And we'll talk about that in more detail as well. On this slide, you see what does not constitute surveillance equipment. So a camera intended to record activity inside of city buildings or facilities or entrances of city buildings, that's not considered surveillance equipment. So the way to think about that is, the city has the ability to watch what's going on in our own buildings, to protect what's happening in our own buildings. A camera installed to monitor and protect the physical integrity of city infrastructure, that's not considered surveillance equipment. Again, these were already in place in the old policy. And the third one is surveillance equipment acquired prior to what previously said the effective date. And now that we're doing the update, we've included what that original effective date was, and that's March 24th of 2015. You'll see a new section, and that's equipment that is not capable of collecting identifiable information due to design limitations in resolution and or quality. I think the clearest example of this is like car counting technology, as Mobile GR works to see how many cars we have on the road. That technology, although otherwise may fit the definition, it's not designed to capture any identifiable information about those vehicles. It's designed just to be able to count those vehicles. So that's what we're speaking of when we talk about that type of exception. The next space is the acquisition of surveillance equipment or services. So as you look at this space, really what we're talking about here is the ability to acquire, use, or deploy new surveillance equipment. And essentially, what's always been the process is it's been a two-step process. That means that the department requesting the technology had to get permission through City Commission for the actual details of the process, and they also had to go through the fiscal committee for the financial part. That's the short summary of how the process worked previously. But now the way the process works is that departments are still required to obtain approval to the initial acquisition, use, or deployment of that equipment or service. But once authority is granted to acquire, use, or deploy new surveillance equipment or services, a department does not have to seek authority for each additional use or deployment of the same surveillance equipment. Again, this was never a requirement before, but as we work through our policies and procedures, we want to make sure that they're explicitly clear. So not only do the departments understand the operation, but also community can look at the policy and understand the way that we operate regarding it. The process by which this acquisition occurs is now a three-step process. The first step is that the department shall provide a briefing regarding the requested surveillance equipment to the Public Safety Committee of the Grand Rapids City Commission at a properly noticed meeting pursuant to the Open Meetings Act. At that briefing, they must include a description of all proposed operational protocols and data management protocols associated with the use of this technology. At this briefing before public safety, the request from the department is for a public hearing. So essentially what will happen is the department goes to the Public Safety Committee, provides its briefing and says, we're requesting a public hearing before the City Commission so that the members of the public have the opportunity to speak to this technology, to the acquisition, to the use or deployment of this technology. The public hearing before the Grand Rapids City Commission would then happen, and again, that's for any acquisition, use, or deployment of that new surveillance technology. And it has to happen at a properly noticed public hearing before this commission. The next step is the fiscal approval, and this remains unchanged. So the public hearing, the commission is not being asked to take action at that point. Commission is just simply hearing from community as we would with other public hearings. The next step will be that fiscal approval, and the item will then be brought before the fiscal committee for approval there. As we talk about, and the thing to note, I guess, about two of those things, both the fiscal committee part of this as well as the public safety committee part of this still ends up on the consent agenda, right? So the processes here remain unchanged. The standard of approval for this is the decision to acquire, use, or deploy new surveillance equipment or surveillance services shall be made in the best interest of Grand Rapidians. Decisions to approve the acquisition, use, or deployment of this new surveillance equipment or surveillance service shall consider the fiscal impacts of the purchase, community impact, privacy interests of impacted individuals, and ensure that the use of the technology will not be based upon discriminatory practices or factors. So as these bodies consider whether or not to move forward with this acquisition, this is the standard of approval that should be reviewed. The next step is the operational protocol. So the operational protocols, for the most part, remain unchanged. Here you will see the addition of the words use or deployment. So originally we saw the acquisition was considered in the operational protocols, but we know that it might not always be a traditional purchase. And the point behind this policy is to make sure that not only the acquisition, but the use or deployment is also being considered. So that was added. And you'll also see that previously this information was presented directly to the City Commission, but based on the change, it would go to the Public Safety Committee. And the details related to those operational protocols remain unchanged, so I will not go through them at this time. When we look at this second page of operational protocols, again, they in large part remain unchanged, but I'll spend some time on number 10. When we look at number 10, we're looking at whether a department intends to share access to the surveillance equipment or the collected data with any other governmental entity. That's the original language. So for this operational protocol in the request and the document that was prepared, the department would have to share, will this equipment gather information that we are likely to share somewhere else? And here, that remains as part of it, but it goes on to require additional detail. So if this is the type of technology that will capture information where it will likely be shared, a general description of the types of incidents in which information sharing will occur should be included. That requires us to do that preliminary work before requesting the technology. What type of details will we share? Under what type of circumstances might that happen? Again, that's looking at those privacy interests. The the other thing that is important to point out is the mere sharing of information with another governmental entity does not automatically fall within the jurisdiction of this process, of this policy. We recognize that there are times in government where information is going to be shared, and that's a part of the way that government works. That's a part, specifically in areas like law enforcement, where those types of things will occur. The only time that it comes in the jurisdiction of this policy is if it's the type of incident that should have been reasonably foreseeable and was not included in that general description. The other part that was added here, and I'm grateful for the work of the NAACP and pointing this out, the need for this out, and that's an assessment identifying with specificity any potential adverse impacts that the surveillance technology, if deployed, might have on civil liberties and civil rights, as well as what specific affirmative measures will be implemented to safeguard the public from potential adverse impacts. So what we're talking about there is we recognize that there is a need for technology helps in many ways, but there are times where there can be adverse impacts through the use of technology. So we need to be intentional as a city government where we say, what are those potential adverse impacts? And we do that risk analysis. We do that cost-benefit analysis to determine if it's the best move to move forward. And then what can we do to stop those adverse impacts before they start? This next section is the data management protocols. Again, it remains largely unchanged. You'll see the effective date from the original signing has been added, and we'll leave that without further detail at this time. Data mining remains unchanged as well, so given time, I won't go through it in detail. This next section is completely new, so we'll talk through it in a little more detail, and that's the governance and oversight section of this policy. Essentially, what was added in this policy was the ability for there to be some type of governance, a governance structure that makes sense for Grand Rapidians and makes sense for the city departments. When we look through it, the first step is complaints. So again, as we look at that, it's important to point out that there have been no substantiated violations of the policy to date, but this is a proactive measure where we say if there is or if there are complaints regarding misuse or overuse of surveillance equipment or surveillance services, individuals may file complaints with the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. And OPA will then conduct an investigative audit and prepare an audit summary regarding that potential violation. OPA in this is authorized to investigate as it relates to this, but it's an important caveat here is that if there was an individual complaint about the actions of an officer, we know that that is regulated by City Commission Policy 800-02, specifically Section 2, which is regards the investigation of complaints, which speaks to complaints being investigated by Internal Affairs. So this policy is not changing that part of the process, but if we're talking about surveillance equipment or the use of surveillance equipment in and of itself, it allows for those complaints to be investigated and reported on in this way. So the audit summary portion of this will be provided to the complainant, to the city manager, and to the department director. After consultation with the city attorney's office, OPA will also publish that audit summary. And this is one of those important factors that really speaks to the transparency that we're working towards as a city. We recognize that, and we hear the cries from community that relates to additional information about some of these operations. So this is a space where we'll work through that part of it. And there's another line here that also says, to the extent allowed by law, departments are directed to cooperate with OPA that relates to those reviews, audits, and reports. This next section is the Surveillance Oversight Committee. And as we talk through the use of a Surveillance Oversight Committee, there are different models, different places. And one of the things we recognize is that we already have a Public Safety Committee that's charged with doing work around our public safety efforts here in the city of Grand Rapids. So we set it up so that the Public Safety Committee will serve as the city's Surveillance Oversight Committee. Essentially, their major functions will be what we already spoke to, that initial request as it relates to the public hearing will come to the Public Safety Committee. In addition to that, the audit summaries that are prepared by the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability will come before that Public Safety Committee. The Public Safety Committee will review that audit summary. They won't be charged or have the power to do individual investigations. However, they will review the audit summaries that are presented, and they'll have the opportunity to hear the results of that investigation, questions can be answered by that department, by the city attorney's office, or by the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. If, after reviewing the audit summary, the Public Safety Committee finds that there was a violation of the surveillance policy, this policy empowers them to disallow the use of that technology moving forward. Now, there will be opportunities to renew that use of technology. That can happen through the department coming back to public safety for requests for reconsideration, or by the city manager bringing that request before the entire city commission. The next part of this is the surveillance use reports. Again, this speaks to the transparency and the public reporting that we're working towards. So these surveillance use reports are quarterly reports. This is how the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability will keep track of the surveillance technology that's being used around the city. So departments will provide a clear statement describing the purpose and specific use of the technology, the type of services that were used, the approximate amount of time it was used, and a description of the general location where the surveillance equipment was used. And that's broken down by ward and nearest intersection. So on a quarterly basis, departments that use surveillance technology will provide that to OPA. OPA will use that information to prepare an annual surveillance report. And this annual report will talk about many of the things we've talked about: how the technology is used, how and when the data is collected, a breakdown of where the surveillance technology was deployed geographically by ward, whether the reported monitoring was subject to a warrant or a non-warrant from court authorization, a summary of complaints related to it, as well as any internal audits. And then number 7 is an important part of it, an analysis of any discriminatory, disparate, and other adverse impacts the use of the technology may have had on the public civil rights and civil liberties. And this is including but not limited to those guaranteed by the 1st, 4th, and 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. To the extent possible, disaggregated by race, gender, age, and ward. And again, that goes back to our commitment that the city's made in its strategic plan. We'll also, in this report, include annual costs for that technology and the source of that funding. So the transparency requirements section of this policy existed, but has been added to, and has been moved to the new governance section to make it make sense. So the city shall maintain on a website accessible to the public a full listing of approvals issued by the City Commission for acquisition or use of surveillance equipment. Again, that part already existed. But for purposes of this reporting aspects of this policy, disclosure of detailed information that would significantly interfere with an ongoing investigation may be withheld until the conclusion of the investigation. Even during an ongoing investigation, departments are still required to disclose the use of surveillance equipment or services and other non-detailed information to OPA. I'll read the second part and then we'll explain. Additionally, given the high frequency regarding the use of Grand Rapids Police Department body-worn cameras and in-car video, the Grand Rapids Police Department needs only to report alleged or actual failure to use body-worn cameras or in-car video. So let's speak to this part real quickly. So the first thing is that we recognize that there are times during, especially criminal investigations, where some information is just confidential. During the ongoing investigation, we have to protect the rights of the accused, and we can't just share everything immediately. That doesn't mean that it can't be shared as part of a report subsequently, but in the event that an ongoing investigation is happening, there's a court order that says that things can't be shared or things of that nature. This clause takes into account the fact that there will be times when that can't be shared immediately. The second part of that is the body-worn cameras and our in-car video. One thing that I know this commission knows, and hope the public knows, that those things are expected to be used regularly. In fact, there is a very large amount of video that is collected on a daily basis by the Grand Rapids Police Department. Instead of making this an overly burdensome policy that requires them to report every time they use it, a more impactful question is, what are those situations in which technology may not have been used, and then we can look at why that may have occurred. The next section, the language has been updated, but the meaning behind the language has not changed. So changes to this policy shall be made by the city manager, and the city manager shall inform the Public Safety Committee of the City Commission of any changes prior to changes taking force, and the changes shall be posted on the city's website. Again, this is already the policy, but it's just to make sure that the language is clear and to reflect the fact that the Public Safety Committee will be serving as the committee on surveillance oversight. This section is new. This is the prohibited uses section. So prohibited uses, essentially, these are things that the technology cannot be used for. The technology cannot be used to harass, intimidate, or discriminate against any individual or group. The technology cannot be used for to conduct personal business of any type, or except as approved by the city manager or their designee. In extenuating circumstances, surveillance equipment shall not be weaponized. And we'll talk about those extenuating circumstances now, so this makes a little more sense. So previously in our policy, the current policy, right, in the policy, the way it read, there was an exception for exigent circumstances. Exigent circumstances is a legal theory or something under the law that deals with the Fourth Amendment. It's an exception to the Fourth Amendment. The most classic example of that is when there is a fleeing suspect running into a home and officers are in hot pursuit of them, and they follow them into a home without getting a warrant in order to make sure that either they don't cause harm to someone else or they don't destroy evidence or something like that. That's an overly simplified explanation of exigent circumstances. We use that language in our policy not to mean the traditional legal definition. We use it to explain an exception that allows for departments to get surveillance technology. Well, that was confusing because it didn't match with the traditional legal definition. So if someone had any knowledge of the traditional legal definition and then looked at our policy, it didn't match. It didn't make sense there. So after some work with the assistance of the legal department, the extenuating circumstances definition was created. And that essentially says that notwithstanding the above policy provisions, department may acquire or use new surveillance equipment or services in extenuating circumstances. Again, we talked about those extenuating circumstances in that definition section of the policy earlier, but in those circumstances they may use it. However, they can only use it for the extenuating circumstance. So we're talking about if someone's life is at risk and they don't have the opportunity to come before the Public Safety Committee to request the use of this technology. Departments can utilize that equipment, but they can only use it for that extenuating circumstance. This is not now an allowance to use all the time, and they must report that use within 72 hours to the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability, and then they'll also have to report it to the Public Safety Committee, and they must stop using it unless they obtain additional authority to continue moving forward with the use of that technology. This next section is an exemption for the replacement of surveillance equipment or surveillance services. And I'll summarize it instead of reading every line. Essentially, this policy says that if there is a breakdown in technology, so technology has already been approved and it's broken down, there's an exception here that allows departments to replace that technology without going through the full public hearing because that's already occurred. To the extent that fiscal authority is needed, they would still have to go through the fiscal committee. But as it relates to replacement, or if there's a contract that says this technology needs to be updated by this date, but it's already been approved, they won't have to come back before the Public Safety Committee to get approval for technology that's already been approved. This also speaks to the fact that we recognize that technology updates over time. I think the classic example, or the example I use most when talking about this, is like an iPhone camera. So every time a new iPhone comes out, I get one. But every time it comes out, the camera is a little better than it was before. But it's still a camera. It's still taking pictures. And that's the full use of what the camera is for at that point, is to take those pictures. We would not require departments to come back and say, the camera is a little better than it was before, in order to get that type of approval. Now, if the camera could do something different, like take pictures through walls, right, they would need to come back and get that type of permission, right? So that's really what we're talking about in this exemption. We're talking about the ability for departments to have that continuity of operations and moving forward. All right, so that actually takes us through all of the changes to the policy. As we talk about next steps, OPA will provide updates to city staff regarding changes through the month of December. The city manager anticipates ratifying this policy on January 3rd of 2022, and will continue to be available to community for updates, education, and engagement regarding changes to the policy. Thank you.
Mayor, if I could, before Chief Payne comes up, just one more process. So, as you're all aware, this has been a year-long or more conversation with communications in writing, as well as previous briefings to the Public Safety Committee. We anticipate having one more update with the Public Safety Committee next week, next Tuesday, if there's any additional follow-up that remains as a result of this conversation. So with that, I will invite the police chief to come up.
Thanks, City Manager. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, and City Manager. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. Thank you, Mr. Davis. A lot of work has gone into this. We've worked with him, with the law department, and in looking at this, it really aligns with our strategic plan from the police department, the transparency, moving forward with technology. We'll continue to speak or look at the policy, but I see nothing in the policy that will be troublesome for us to move forward with our technology. Technology is going to be a big part of law enforcement moving forward. It's here. It's only going to improve. Having this type of policy and being able to acquire that type of equipment, I think speaks to our commitment to having the public involved in the process and letting the public know what we have. So again, thank you, and we look forward to continuing to work on this. And NAACP, I know, are here. We've had meetings with them a while ago, but thank you to Mr. Davis for the work he's done on this.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. I will add my thanks. I know, concerns were brought to my attention, and I feel that they've been adequately addressed within these revisions. Also want to thank our community partners with NAACP and ACLU and others who have reached out to us as we've worked through this update. I'll turn it to my colleagues to see if there are questions or comments. Commissioner Moody?
Thank you, Mr. Davis, for this report. I appreciate it. I just have one question in reference to Section 3 of Operational Protocol. Number 10, you mentioned something in reference to foreseen. Can you give me an example of what you mean by that when you talk about any event that's foreseeable in reference to the surveillance equipment or information that has to be shared?
Sure. If and I'll use the police department as an example. If the police department were using some type of recording equipment that fell within the definition of surveillance equipment to pursue a fleeing suspect, for example, it should be reasonably foreseeable that, the department may have to share that information with another police department in a neighboring city if that individual crosses the lines, right, city lines, and the investigation is now looked at in a different space. So those are the types of things that are reasonably foreseeable, recognizing that in the regular course of the police department's work, there's information sharing that goes on between law enforcement entities. So those types of things would have to be reflected in that section.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that would include surrounding jurisdictions, state police,
That's
county
correct.
sheriff.
That's correct.
Thanks. All right, other questions or comments? Go to Commissioner Ruppert and then Commissioner Lanier.
Thanks, Brandon. That was a lot of work, a lot of conversations. A couple of thoughts. First of all, I just appreciate the definitions. I think that's really helpful. And I mean, I've seen that term exigent circumstances, and it's confusing to people. So I appreciate that work. I appreciate the inclusion of that assessment ahead of time, and really the clarity of roles here, because this is something that this is a city manager policy, and so I appreciate the role of just outlining your role, public safety's role, city manager's role, our role. I think that's just going to be helpful to the community. One question that I have, and I'm wondering if it would be okay to hear from our partners at the NAACP at this juncture to just kind of hear their thoughts about the process and how they're feeling about it. And then the only question that I had was, since we are looking at this, it excludes surveillance that we purchased pre-2015, and just wondering, like, what did we purchase pre-2015, and was that examined and run through kind of some of the new things that we're going to run new technologies through in the future?
Yeah, Mayor, before Mr. Davis responds, let me address the prior purchases. So the fire department has technology that utilizes drones to respond to fire alarms and to surveil structures from above, to look at places of ingress, egress, and it is extremely helpful. That was a pre-approved use. And they obviously need to continue that. They're actually they've been holding up a purchase until we have this technology adopted. And this is one of the technologies that helps our fire department become, one of the accredited departments and the ISO 1 rating and the best department in the country. So we want to continue that practice. And unfortunately, I don't see anyone from the department here today, but that's one of the examples that comes to mind immediately.
Yes, I think City Manager gave the perfect example. The reason that date remains in place is because many of the things that we're talking about just were not requirements at that time, but they're already embedded into the operations of city government. So it's not that we said, oh, there's this troublesome technology out there and we just won't look at it. But for example, we talk about a public hearing and that's now a requirement. Well, a public hearing most certainly was not a requirement at that time. We don't want there to be some interruption of operations, especially when we talk about public safety matters. So that's why we continue with the policy, that part of the policy as originally drafted.
Yeah, and I'll add, City Manager, I believe we also, our fire department has used drones for severe weather events to keep track of flooding, ice jams, so in emergency responses as well. Over the last several years, when we've had severe weather events, they've been used as well. And I would welcome if Clee Jackson wants to come forward and say a few words briefly, and then I'll get to additional comments or questions by my colleagues.
I think Mr. Jackson is being accompanied by Attorney Carlton Mayer from the NAACP, who did a lot of the work related to originally bringing this forward for us.
Great. Welcome, Carlton. Hi, Clee.
Good morning. I'm actually going to ask Attorney Mayer to speak on behalf of the NAACP, but I do want to, just like I think the city manager has said, this has been like a year process. And I think this is a perfect example of when community and local government comes together to make sure that the rights of citizens are protected, but also that we are protecting our local law enforcement agents. So I ask Carlton to come up.
Thanks, Clee. And Clee, I appreciate your leadership and advocacy on this. Thanks. Carlton, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. And good morning to everybody. The only thing I would say is that I do believe, just like what Clee said, and also what Brandon Davis and Police Chief Payne said, I want to just reiterate that this, I think, is a good example of what real public safety looks like when you have the elected officials, you have community members, law enforcement, everybody in the community who's a stakeholder for it, coming together to work on it. And I believe this process has shown that to be true. So I do hope that going forward, this is not like a one and done. This is just a part of, the work that the city is going to continue to do moving forward on continuing efforts like these.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your insight and expertise. Thanks. Commissioner Lanier?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Davis, for the presentation. I actually wanted to kind of start with some history and a historic narrative regarding some of this work. And it was, I'm really grateful to see President Jackson, Mr. Mayers, and Ahmad and Kareem here today, because the NAACP was a part of a group of us who were kind of addressing and coming up with different recommendations for public safety in years past. And one of those recommendations was to add the body-worn cameras. And in response to adding body-worn cameras, the ACLU kind of started this conversation about, okay, but what does this mean? This is a good thing, but how can we put something in place to also protect people when surveillance is being used? And so then that started a whole different conversation, which resulted in this policy. And so I'm grateful to the NAACP for staying the course and making sure that as decisions are being made, that you continue the dialogue in order to make sure that there are protections in place. So thank you for that. I have a few questions, and I have them marked, Brandon. So I'm curious to know, I'm on section 2 when it gets to the public hearing. Sometimes when there's a public hearing, there is a 30-day notice that's required, and other times there's a 14-day notice. So for this policy, it doesn't have any specificity, so I'm curious to know if there's a time frame in which we're thinking that we would have, and if so, can we just add it to the policy so that then it's consistently administered? You want me to ask all of them?
However you want me to respond.
I'll do it that. I'll just ask them all and then you can respond. I'm also a little curious about, I know after the policy was in place, there had been a number of what I would consider surveillance technology that we've, voted on and considered. And sometimes it felt like, reminders needed to be made in order for the engagement, the public engagement to occur. I think the public hearing is certainly a more standardized way of making sure that the public is informed and we receive feedback. But I'm also curious to know if this means that some of the more grassroots engagement will then no longer exist because we're going to this more formal process that sometimes can exclude people if they're not in tune with when and how we engage in that manner. Commissioner Moody asked my next question. And then, so I'm also curious, I'm in section 6, and I think you kind of talked about it towards the end of your presentation, but I'm just wondering if, so when we're considering our budget annually, that's typically when city manager, a staff member will come before the commission to talk about kind of some of the new things that they're considering. And so I'm wondering if there could be a way to formalize some of the surveillance technology kind of in all at one time annually, you know what I mean? And so that then it becomes, okay, during this time of the year, we know they'll be talking about surveillance. I don't know if that's challenging to do, but because most of the time it's tied to budget, we know it'll come prior to the budget being adopted. So in some ways it already exists. People aren't just randomly making some of the surveillance decisions. It's usually tied to, because it's typically expensive. So I don't know if I'm just curious if there had been conversation about that or not. And then I'm also wondering about if there is, from the Oversight Committee, there's a way for there to be kind of a complaint or concern to be shared with OPA in the event, so I'll make that the equivalent of an IA complaint. If then they're not pleased with the response from OPA, is there another place like CAB for then there to be a concern taken to another level that would have another process in place? And just curious if that's been discussed. And I think I'm also wondering, because this policy, city manager mirrors a lot of kind of what happens with ordinances, with the public hearing and things of that nature. So it's kind of outside of what would typically happen with the city policy. I'm wondering then, in section 7, when we get to the place where it says when the changes are made, should those changes take the same steps that the surveillance that's being considered take? For example, the public hearing, like we would with an ordinance change and things of that nature. So I don't know if that's too much, but because it's mirroring an ordinance, I think that's part of why I'm asking it that way. And I thank you, Chief, for being here and sharing your feedback. I'm also curious, and I think Mr. Jackson, President Jackson may have spoken to this a little bit, because I know there's been engagement not only with the leadership of the police department, but also the union leadership as well, to kind of get their feedback and weigh into this as well. So I'm just thanking you for that. And if there's any more feedback regarding their response, it would be great to hear that too. That's it.
City Manager, you want to start with some of those answers, and then
we
we'll
will
turn it
do
over
this
to Brandon.
in collaboration.
Yes, sir.
Between the chief, Mr. Davis, and myself. I think your initial comment, question about the public hearing notice, we can come up with some parameters. What I'd like to do, since it is not an ordinance, it is not legislation from the committee, I think it depends on the notice. I'd like to have a little bit more engagement from our public information professionals, both in the police department and our the corporate office, and figure out, based on the issue, how much engagement is really needed. There may be need to be more months of staff level engagement before the official public hearing for final comments before decisions are made. But I think minimally, what we would like to do is do what we do in, at least a meeting notification. So standardly, at least 2 weeks minimally. But we can look at that time frame and see, and I'll let Mr. Davis reply. Part of the question on the process, procurement, yes, I would love for all purchases to be, funding for any enhanced services or purchases to be made during the budget process. But there are times where, as we got last time with grant funding, where they may be time specific and it may be outside of our budget process, or it may be service driven, and there may be a need to have enhancement before the next fiscal year process occurs. And so I think to the extent possible, we can plan for technology improvement, and as part of our tech assessment citywide, I'm looking at Mr. Matthews, as we did that in another process in another community. But I do think there are times where there will be requests that will come outside of the budget process. I'll defer to Mr. Davis on the complaint process and the chief on the departmental perspectives.
Thank you, City Manager. As it relates to the first part, I'll start with the complaint process. So the difference between the Civilian Appeals Board or Internal Affairs Investigation and this is the question of employee discipline. This isn't a question of employee discipline. This is a question, and it's not a question of employee rights. This is a question of the city essentially holding itself accountable as it relates to operational procedures that are set up within city government. But there is a check put in place. So OPA will do an audit essentially and come up with OPA's findings, but those come before the Public Safety Committee for consideration, or what in their operation is the Committee on Oversight of Surveillance. It comes before them to make that determination. So that's included in that complaint. In that complaint section, talks about the fact that the Public Safety Committee will then have the opportunity to review it, and that's where they get that authority to say, no, we'll stop the use of technology based on that violation, or they can make a decision not to do that if they find that's not necessary. So I do agree, Commissioner, that there needed to be some type of check there, and that's why we embedded that language in that way. As it relates to the administrative order changes and why it's laid out this way, quite frankly, it's because it is an administrative order, and the city manager serves as director of public safety in that capacity. So in many ways, in an attempt to make sure that we are involving community in these processes, because there is community interest. The city manager, then Manager Sundstrom, and now City Manager Washington are allowing community or having community be involved in processes that they would not otherwise be required to be involved in, that based on city managers given authority as the director of public safety, many parts of those decisions are decisions that he'd be able to make, specifically as it relates to reviewing audits or complaints or things of that nature related to the use of that technology. So it was designed in a way that there's still transparency related to any changes that are being made, but recognizing that there is a degree of autonomy given the nature of the system of government that we have that allows the city manager to make some of those changes. Specifically as it relates to the engagement process, Commissioner, I think that's a great question. The public hearing is not designed to take away from grassroots engagement at all. In fact, as the city manager indicated, that type of engagement will, I think, have to continue in order, ultimately it's coming before two bodies, right? So the decision is coming before the Public Safety Committee, and it's also coming before the Fiscal Committee, and then eventually, because of the consent agenda process, will be before this commission in some way. So in order to make sure that the commission it understands the position of community, it's incumbent upon city departments to make sure they're doing engagement properly. And the city manager is right in indicating that engagement will be different depending on what type of technology it is. Different types of technology require different things. As it relates to the specific date or the amount of time, we talked about that in a lot of detail. Original drafts spoke to 30 days, right? But we really looked at the way that commission meetings flow, when public safety meetings are held, and whether or not that would be the best way to make sure that the public has the opportunity to speak about it, and whether or not it would also operationally make sense for the way that procurement happens. So because of that, a fixed amount of time was not included, but to the city manager's point, that window will be longer for some, but I think at minimum be at that 2 weeks otherwise. Lastly, as it relates to conversations with others in the department, I'll defer to the chief, but I can speak to the fact that OPA did meet with the command union related to this item and actually received feedback and some of that is reflected in the policy. So I appreciate Captain Maycroft for that. Captain Collar for that. And then we also did send an invitation to the police union. Unfortunately, we weren't able to connect, but we're hoping to continue to connect on this item and other items. Chief.
No, Mr. Davis is correct. Command was contacted and they provided some feedback. I know the president of the other union was out of town last week for a funeral, so that may be a reason. But we've had considerable engagement as a department with Mr. Davis over this policy and the changes that were made. I don't see anything within the policy that really would be counter or the collective bargaining agreement would come in. So it's more of a courtesy reaching out to the unions, and I really appreciate that because I think they need their input, or their input is valuable also.
Thanks, Chief. All right, any final questions or comments, Commissioner?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Davis, for the presentation. I'll echo the comments of my colleagues about, not just hearing you, Mr. Davis, but hearing from the City Attorney's Office, as well as you, Chief, and community. So I think this is something to be celebrated and just appreciate. So Commissioner Lanier asked one of my questions about the timeline and then specifically about the communication. I'll go a step further and just say, what does that, I feel like there's been times after we voted on something, obviously we're not voting today, it's a briefing, but just thinking through what that communication efforts might be. Specifically, I'm thinking about our neighborhood associations who oftentimes are pulled upon. So just wanted to put that out there. I don't think that's necessarily a follow-up question, but just to consider what that communication plan is. And I know City Manager, you talked about that as well. When we look in the policy, there's, the language is referring to the cost of the acquisition. And I think, would it be possible to say the cost of the acquisition as well as the data storage associated? Or I don't know if we might not always know that, but I know in our last budget processes, we've talked quite a bit about different line items in Chief, your budget as it related to the storage of data, and that is quite costly and I think surprising to some of us. So that maybe that's not known at the time of purchase, but I think that is another cost that I personally would like to see broken down in our fiscal committee if there's an assumption of that, at least in the first year. In the section where you talked about the sharing of data, and you talked about it wouldn't be the assumption and all those pieces, but would the extenuating circumstances, I'm thinking about some of the emergency situations, would those automatically be times where information would be shared because of, natural disasters or things like that? And then there is a part about the complaint process and the reports that your office would do, and it talks about who would receive them. And then it also talks about public safety receiving copies of those audit summaries. could we also include city commission, since 3 commissioners sit on that public safety body? But I would like to be able to see those reports if I wasn't a member of the public safety committee. And then my last question is, Mayor, you talked about, some of these, the opportunities for improvement in the policy and that being brought up to you. And I think we're living in the last 2 years of really asking ourselves, how do we define public safety? So my question is, we're all sitting here, we know we have term limits in our city. How do we, what is the regular protocol to review this policy, not only from any legal perspectives, but just anything that might be shifting or changing? So I'm not familiar with that process. If there is something that would highlight that, I think that would be helpful too. Thank you.
Thanks. Good questions, Commissioner. Mr. Davis, you want to?
Sure.
Respond.
So thank you, Commissioner. I think that's great suggestions as it relates to making sure that we're connecting with the neighborhood associations regarding those conversations about this policy and any changes that are implemented. As it relates to data storage costs, I can't speak to whether or not that's physically available at the time that those reports are garnered. But those are conversations we can have, and I'll make sure that I connect with Ms. Claren and the other departments involved to see if that's something that can be included. Providing the reports to City Commission, I think that's something that can most certainly be done. And again, this is an administrative policy, but obviously my department will have to prepare an SOP related to how we operate regarding that. So I'll make sure that's included in the SOP about how we work in those types of situations. And there was one additional question that I didn't get to note.
Yeah, that was the question on the timing of the review of the policies.
City Manager, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I will. And I was just confirming with Mr. Kane that we make available not just this information, but all the reports to public safety as a practice to the full City Commission, anything that's presented there. So we'll make sure to follow up on that. And on the review of I guess holistically all policies, and specifically this one. There's just not administrative capacity to, schedule a review of every administrative policy or ordinance that we have as a city. What I see as a common practice is when you begin a new policy and you're uncertain of its implication or impact, you typically have a monitoring period or a sunset period where you come back and you evaluate to see if it's implemented in the intended way, and if not, you very intentionally make those modifications. We certainly can do this for this one if we want to evaluate within a year or so after implementation the effectiveness of the policy and see if additional changes are made for this specific issue. I think others are, again, case by case, unless there are specific things that we're trying to address and not just having a general review of every every administrative policy, every ordinance. But in this case, we certainly can establish a date for follow-up. And I think we've done it within the procedure in requiring the accountability of the annual report. So I think based on that, we will self-evaluate every year. And we just need to be clear on when the date of the annual report will be.
Sure.
Yeah, and I would trust that the OPA will be diligent about that. And when there are concerns brought to your attention, I expect that you'll connect with City Manager about any changes.
Definitely.
Yeah, thanks. All right, Commissioner Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. Brandon, thanks so much for the overview. And I want to join my colleagues in recognizing the work put in by you, as well as the NAACP and the police department, or even our law department. I think that what we have before us is an opportunity to hopefully communicate to the community just the absolute opportunity here to hopefully even grow confidence in terms of the work of city staff, the work of the department, the work of the NAACP. I think this was, as has been mentioned, an effort where community had an opportunity to speak into an issue. And city manager and colleagues, my hope is that we can work with or make sure that Mr. Green, who is our communications director, that he can develop a narrative that can clearly articulate exactly what this means and how, again, it speaks to an opportunity for us to share with the community that this was a concerted effort that just didn't consist of just folks who work for the city, but this also, again, had the work of the NAACP and exactly what it means. What does it mean to have these things in place as it relates to surveillance? I know that President Jackson mentioned that, again, this work has been undertaken or has been underway for well over a year, and there were a number of cities throughout the country back last year in 20 who passed laws around surveillance all throughout the country. And I think that we join them in recognizing the need to take a good hard look at what we have on the books. But most importantly, this is, I would say, something that in the community people are genuinely concerned about. They want to know what exactly are my rights. What if I get pulled over, what's taking place, what can be kept, what can be destroyed. And I think that, again, we have an obligation and I think a golden opportunity to clearly communicate to the public what all of this means. And so that would be my hope, city managers, that Mr. Green can help to, again, create a narrative that can make this all the more easier to understand. So,
We'll let Mr. David Green respond to that.
Thank you, Commissioner. And then, of course, I've also noted the desire of the Commission to do some extensive outreach. So once this is finalized, we will make a concerted effort on this. To the point about the engagement period and so forth, I do think that the manager was correct that that's going to be probably somewhat situationally dependent. Adding a minor upgrade to a piece of technology is probably very different than employing an entirely new technology. For instance, if the police department wants to purchase drones, that's probably going to take a considerable amount of outreach because that is not a capability they currently have. But if they want to add resolution enhancement to maybe the body-worn cameras, that may not require quite as extensive of an outreach. So that'll be somewhat situation dependent, pending the formal requirements. But we'll definitely take an opportunity, especially this, because it is good work. It does enhance the transparency, and so it's something that once the policy is formalized and we have some of the details built around it from the administrative side, we'll be sure to reach out to the community and make sure they understand what's happening.
Great, thank you. All right, commissioners, with that, I think we'll go ahead and close this briefing. So a couple of reminders, we do have an Economic Development Project Team today at 12:30, and then we're back together tonight at 7. We do have a number of scheduled public hearings tonight before us, and so I will plan to see you all then. So with that, we are done. Thank you. No, we have one next week. Oh, it's next week. Yeah, yep. Thank you. Yep.